I wake up every day right here, right in Punxsutawney, and it's always February 2nd.
Groundhog Day is a comedy classic that depicts a rare yet realistic psychological ordeal of a man who keeps reliving the same day over and over for thousands of years. Scary, right? What is even more dreadful are the bizarre events that occurred during and after filming. Number 20. The script was inspired by a vampire story. From the start, Groundhog Day feels like one of those quirky romantic comedies, but the true origin of its script is far more unusual and even a little dark. Screenwriter Danny Rubin has openly revealed that the inspiration behind Groundhog Day did not come from the holiday itself or any romantic idea, but from vampire fiction. At the time, Rubin was fascinated by the concept of immortality, particularly in terms of its psychological impact on an individual. He had been toying with a concept about a man who never ages or dies, much like a vampire. But instead of feeding on blood or living in coffins, this character would keep existing while the world moved on. This intrigued Rubin about the moral and emotional consequences of living forever. Would the person become worn out, selfish, detached, or enlightened and selfless after years of watching human nature repeat itself? These were questions that begged for answers in Rubin's mind. So this philosophical thread put his imagination to work. He began to imagine a character who relived the same day over and over, learning the routines, manipulating events, and gradually transforming as a person. Rubin has said in interviews that this idea crystallized while he was reading a book about vampires, contemplating how such creatures interact with mortals and eventually grow numb to human concerns. Ironically, the holiday of Groundhog Day was not initially central to the story. Rubin simply needed a day that was unremarkable, somewhat absurd, and easy to reset without huge consequences. Although Ramis helped lighten the tone, Rubin's darker philosophical roots remained. That's why the film resonates on multiple levels. Number 19. The phrase Groundhog Day was not mentioned in the movie. For a film so strongly associated with its title, it will surprise you to know that the words Groundhog Day are never actually spoken in Groundhog Day. Despite the entire story revolving around the February 2nd holiday and the town's annual Groundhog Day celebration, not a single character utters the phrase in the entire movie. This omission is one of those unusual byproducts of writing and editing decisions that reflect the film's tone and direction. Screenwriter Danny Rubin was far more concerned with the philosophical core of the story than the literal celebration itself. For Rubin, the focus was always on the repetition of time, self-reflection, and personal transformation, not the holiday per se. When director Harold Ramis came on board to polish and direct the film, he brought a broader comedic and romantic appeal to the story. This creative decision may have contributed to the film's timeless quality. By avoiding direct repetition of the holiday name, the movie distances itself from feeling like a themed holiday comedy. Number 18. The early draft of the movie was different from what was filmed. Although Groundhog Day is now widely celebrated as a romantic comedy with philosophical depth, its earliest draft was vastly different in tone, structure, and character development. The script, earlier written by Danny Rubin, underwent major changes when Harold Ramis came on board as co-writer and director. He shifted the film from a somber tale into the more accessible and comedic version we know today. In Rubin's original screenplay, the story dropped the audience directly into the time loop with no explanation and no origin story. When the film begins, Phil Connors is already stuck, and the viewer has no clue how long he has been reliving the same day. Rubin wanted the audience to feel disoriented, confused, detached, and unsure of the rules, just as the character was. He didn't include any comedic montages, fun sequences of Phil gorging on food, or scenes of him robbing an armored truck. Instead, the early draft leaned heavily into themes of despair and spiritual emptiness. It was a dark tale of isolation and frustration with life. Harold Ramis saw the story's philosophical potential when he came on board, but he believed it needed humor to appeal to a broader audience. Working with Rubin, Ramis restructured the screenplay to follow a more conventional three-act format. The film now begins before the time loop starts, giving the audience time to meet Phil Connors in his raw, self-centered state. Another key difference was that in Rubin's draft, there was an actual explanation for the time loop. Phil was cursed by an ex-girlfriend who practiced black magic. The script originally opened with her casting the spell in anger, dooming him to relive the same day until he changed. Ramis wisely scrapped this idea. He believed the time loop would be more powerful if it remained unexplained. Despite these changes, Danny Rubin has expressed deep appreciation for how Ramis shaped the final product. Number 17. The time loop may have lasted over 10,000 years. How long was Phil Connors trapped reliving February 2nd? This is one of the most intriguing and endlessly debated aspects of Groundhog Day. The film never states it outrightly, but fans and creators alike have been curious for years. In an interview, screenwriter Danny Rubin once stunned audiences by suggesting that Phil may have been stuck in the time loop for as long as 10,000 years. In a 2005 interview, Rubin explained that his original idea involved Phil being caught in the loop for thousands of years, not just days or months. What do you think was the logic behind this? It is because for someone to truly change their fundamental nature, to learn dozens of new skills, and to move from egotistical cynicism to sincere selflessness, it would require an immense amount of time. However, Harold Ramis, the film's director and co-writer, had a more modest estimate. In the 15th anniversary DVD commentary, Ramis stated that he believed Phil was stuck for about 10 years, later revising this to 30 or 40 years to make more sense in terms of skill development and personal transformation. But when you analyze the skills Phil acquires, the timeline could be longer. He learned to play classical piano at an advanced level. This can take a decade or more. He learned the exact schedule and behavior of an entire town's population. This should take years to achieve. He mastered ice sculpting, understood medical procedures such as the Heimlich maneuver, and recited French poetry from memory. All these require intense study and repetition, which takes time. One frequently cited estimate by fans on the internet suggests around 12,395 days, or approximately 34 years. Interestingly, the exact length of the loop remains a deliberate mystery, and that's part of what makes the film so powerful. Whether it's 10 years, 10,000 years, or forever, the lesson remains that true change requires patience. Number 16. Bill Murray wasn't the first choice. Have you ever tried to imagine Groundhog Day without Bill Murray's pitch-perfect performance as the cynical, self-centered Phil Connors? Of course, it's impossible. However, he wasn't director Harold Ramis's first choice for the role. When the project was coming together, Ramis had a different actor in mind who was equally iconic, but known for a very different on-screen persona. This is none other than Tom Hanks. At the time, Tom Hanks was one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Known for his charm and decency in films like the 1992 A League of Their Own, Hanks radiated a likable character in these movies, which is why Ramis felt he would be a strong fit for the role of a man who evolves from a jerk into a generous, grounded individual. But in what looks like a divine twist, Hanks himself turned the role down. He shared in an interview that he loved the script but felt that audiences wouldn't believe his character's journey. He said in his own words, "Audiences would be sitting there waiting for me to become nice, because that's what I usually do." He figured that this knowledge would undermine the surprise and depth of the character's evolution. His arguments were super intelligent. The role indeed required someone who could convincingly play a bitter, arrogant, emotionally distant man. That's when Bill Murray came into the picture. His public persona and previous film roles had already showcased his talent for sarcasm and detachment. Murray could be funny and cruel at the same time, and he could turn subtle moments of change into deeply moving scenes. These attributes made him the perfect fit for the role of Phil Connors, and he delivered an excellent performance. What made Murray's performance so effective was that audiences didn't immediately expect redemption from him. So while Tom Hanks may have been the original idea, it was Bill Murray's that brought the character of Phil Connors alive. Number 15. Bill Murray was bitten twice by the groundhog.
That's not bad for a quadruped. You gotta check your mirrors, just the side of your eye.
Despite the clever storyline, spiritual themes, and Bill Murray's iconic performance in Groundhog Day, things were not so warm and smooth behind the scenes, especially when it came to the movie's furry co-star. Though the story has become legend among fans, they never knew that Murray was bitten twice by the groundhog used in filming. This is not just an innocent bite. The bites were so bad that he needed a series of anti-rabies shots afterward. Throughout the film, Murray's character Phil Connors has several scenes with the groundhog, who was responsible for predicting the arrival of spring. In one particularly memorable scene, Phil snaps and kidnaps the groundhog, driving off a cliff with it in a desperate attempt to escape his time loop. These scenes required Murray to handle the animal physically, and that's where things got messy. The real groundhog used in the movie wasn't an animatronic device, but a live animal, and it didn't enjoy being held for long periods. Groundhogs are wild rodents characterized by their sharp teeth and claws. They can bite hard when stressed or restrained. While filming the truck driving scenes, the animal became agitated due to multiple takes. The production team reported that the groundhog lashed out and bit Murray on the finger and again on the hand. The bites weren't minor nips. One of them drew blood, and the second reportedly left deep puncture wounds. Murray was taken to a local medical center immediately and underwent a series of painful anti-rabies injections just to be safe. Despite the bites, Murray remained committed to the film. Though some behind-the-scenes stories revealed that Murray became more irritable during the second half of filming, the groundhog encounter was one of several production hiccups that made the shoot emotionally draining for him. Today, the groundhog bites have become a painful reminder that making movie magic sometimes comes with real risks. Number 14. Groundhog Day wasn't filmed in Punxsutawney. Although Groundhog Day is firmly set in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, the film was not shot there. Almost the entire movie was filmed in Woodstock, Illinois, a picturesque Midwestern town about 50 miles northwest of Chicago. This surprising fact often catches fans off guard, especially those who believe the film was a celebration of the real-life Groundhog Day festivities in Punxsutawney. Are you curious to know why the filmmakers didn't shoot on location in the town that gave the holiday its name? Let's find out. According to Harold Ramis, although Punxsutawney was rich in tradition and history, it simply didn't have the kind of cinematic layout needed for the movie. There was no central town square that could serve as the focal point for repeated scenes from multiple angles. Woodstock, on the other hand, offered exactly what the production needed. The town had an open, accessible square that allowed for the dynamic camera movements and recurring tracking shots essential to the film's narrative. The people of Woodstock also played a significant role in winning over the production team. The town's officials and residents were hospitable, flexible, and enthusiastic about hosting a Hollywood production. The town even allowed the production to make temporary changes to buildings and storefronts to reflect the fictionalized Punxsutawney better. That cooperation made a huge difference for the film. In interviews, Harold Ramis later praised the decision to shoot in Woodstock, saying it gave the film a timeless, almost fairy tale quality that made the fictional town feel universal rather than specific. While Punxsutawney may be the holiday's spiritual home, it's Woodstock, Illinois that became the cinematic birthplace of this modern classic. Number 13. Bill Murray and Harold Ramis had a major fallout. The perfectly blended comedy, romance, and philosophy was created from a non-harmonious relationship, especially behind the scenes. One of the film's most bittersweet experiences is the strain in the friendship and working relationship between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. These two comedic powerhouses had collaborated successfully on several films before this one. The tension between the two men began during the early stages of production, and the reasons were entirely justifiable. Bill Murray was going through a difficult personal period, marked by a divorce and a growing sense of disillusionment with the entertainment industry. At the same time, Groundhog Day was meant to be more than just another comedy. Screenwriter Danny Rubin had embedded deep philosophical questions into the time loop concept. However, Ramis, while intellectually engaged with those themes, only saw the film as a comedy with heart and meaning. He wanted a tone that was funny and hopeful. Murray, on the other hand, wanted the original, darker, and more introspective version of the story. These opposing visions led to frequent arguments on set, often about script changes, tone, and pacing. Ramis wanted efficiency and clarity, while Murray demanded ambiguity and depth. At times, their communication broke down so thoroughly that Murray refused to speak directly to Ramis, instead relaying messages through intermediaries, such as a production assistant. The tension became so pronounced that Ramis later described the experience as the most miserable shoot of his career. The emotional fallout didn't end with the wrap party. After the film's release, Murray and Ramis stopped speaking to each other. For over 2 decades, the two men remained estranged, a rift that saddened friends, family, and fans alike. This breakdown in relationships eventually ended in 2010 when Harold Ramis was diagnosed with autoimmune inflammatory vasculitis, a debilitating illness that would ultimately take his life. As news of Ramis's condition spread, Murray was moved by their shared history and finally reached out to reconcile. According to Ramos's family, Bill showed up unannounced at Ramos's home in Chicago, carrying a box of donuts and expressing his desire to make peace. He confessed to regretting his actions and wished they never spent those years in malice. The two reportedly spent a couple of hours together, laughing, reminiscing, and finally putting their differences behind them. When Ramos passed away in 2014, Murray paid tribute to him during that year's Academy Awards, calling him the great Harold Ramis, while presenting the Oscar for Best Cinematography. Although their reconciliation was late, it gave Groundhog Day an even deeper legacy. Number 12. The piano teacher was a real teacher. One of the most memorable sequences in Groundhog Day involves Phil Connors learning to play the piano. What many viewers don't know is that his patient, somewhat amused piano teacher was not a professional actress. That woman was a real piano teacher from the filming location in Woodstock, Illinois. Her name was Peggy Ferguson, and at the time of the shoot, she was a local piano instructor with years of experience teaching students of all ages. When the production team arrived in Woodstock and began scouting for authentic local touches, they decided to cast Peggy in the role instead of hiring a Hollywood actress. Director Harold Ramis recognized that incorporating local people in small roles could help ground the fantasy of the story in a more believable and relatable setting. Peggy, with her real-life experience, was perfect for the part. She knew exactly how to interact with a piano student, even one as impatient and smug as Phil appears to be during their first lesson. In her brief but charming screen time, Peggy's character appears somewhat skeptical but intrigued by Phil's request for lessons. Each subsequent scene shows Phil's rapid improvement, which was basically attributed to the time loop, culminating in a full jazz performance that impresses the entire town. Peggy's understated reactions helped sell the realism of Phil's flow, especially because she was reacting naturally, as a teacher might when witnessing a student's sudden transformation. Another interesting fact is that Bill Murray didn't fake everything in the piano scenes. While he didn't learn to play the full compositions seen in the movie, he did take basic piano lessons. He practiced extensively with hand movements so that his finger placements looked convincing. After the film's release, Peggy Ferguson became something of a local legend. Fans of Groundhog Day who visited Woodstock on filming tours were often surprised to learn that the woman in the piano scenes lived just around the corner. Years later, Peggy continued to teach music and occasionally shared her experiences working on the film with her students. Number 11. Bill Murray was going through a divorce. The real-life emotional state of Bill Murray contributed largely to the complex behind-the-scenes making of Groundhog Day. While Murray, who played the character of Phil Connors, was trapped in a time loop that forces him to confront his selfishness and slowly evolve into a better person, he was also enduring a personal crisis during filming. He was in the midst of a painful divorce from his first wife, Margaret Mickey Kelly. Murray and Kelly had been married since 1981 and had two sons together, Homer and Luke. Their issues began around the early 1990s and were finalized in 1996. But by the time Groundhog Day was in production around 1992, the cracks in their marriage were already significant, and Murray was deeply affected. According to crew members, some of Murray's behavior seemed to reflect a man in emotional distress. His character as Phil Connors and his personal life shared a common feature at that time. Just as Phil faces a metaphorical death and rebirth, trapped in the repetition of the same miserable day, Murray was facing the potential loss of his family and the disintegration of a chapter in his personal life. According to screenwriter Danny Rubin, much of Murray's performance in the film reflects a deep sincerity, especially in the darker and more contemplative moments. No wonder he preferred the comedy and romantic plot to be scrapped from the film. Harold Ramis reportedly tried to support Murray during this time, but their differing views on the film's tone led to a falling out that lasted over 20 years. Many fans believe that Murray's struggles at home intensified his combative attitude on set, and Ramis bore the brunt of it as both a director and longtime friend. In retrospect, Bill Murray wasn't just acting the part of a man facing isolation, despair, and transformation. He was living it, and that made the film more authentic. Number 10. Harold Ramis played the Doctor. One of the most subtle cameos in Groundhog Day was the appearance of the director, Harold Ramis. When Phil Connors, desperate to understand what's happening to him, visits a neurologist for help, the doctor who examines him is played by none other than Harold Ramis. Known for his roles in Ghostbusters, Stripes, and Caddyshack, Ramos had long been both a comedic performer and a behind-the-camera force. He decided to take on the role of the neurologist as a quiet nod to his roots as an actor, and perhaps a subtle way to keep the tone of the scene grounded and comedic while still serving the plot. Interestingly, Ramos's role as the doctor mirrors the film's larger themes. Ramos wasn't originally planning to appear in the film. His cameo emerged from practicality and a touch of creative instinct. This kind of hands-on approach was typical of Ramos, who was known for being collaborative and deeply involved in all aspects of his films. Despite the tension between him and Murray during production, Ramos's performance as the Doctor is calm, professional, and subtle. It's a small performance that adds a quiet layer of charm to the movie, and it's often a fun surprise for fans who recognize him. Ultimately, Harold Ramis's appearance as the neurologist serves as a gentle reminder that Groundhog Day was a film shaped by people who deeply believed in the story they were telling. Number 9. Stephen Tobolowsky improvised iconic lines. One of the most unforgettable characters in Groundhog Day is Ned Ryerson, the overly enthusiastic insurance salesman who seems to have a radar for Phil Connors. Every day, Ned appears out of nowhere on the sidewalk, launches into his clumsy pitch, and ends with awkward enthusiasm that is hilarious. What makes Ned Ryerson so memorable is how actor Stephen Tobolowsky brought him to life, especially through improvisation. Two of Ned's most iconic lines, "Bing" and "Watch out for that first step, it's a doozy," were not originally in the script. Tobolowsky improvised them during filming. The "Bing" in particular became one of the most quoted moments of the film, which was always associated with Ryerson's exaggerated salesman energy. Because Phil Connors lives the same day over and over, his encounters with Ned Ryerson serve as a kind of comedic ticking clock. Every time Ned shows up, Phil reacts with growing irritation and eventually empathy. Without Tobolowsky's animated delivery and unique improvisation, the scenes would have felt repetitive. Tobolowsky's skills brought unexpected emotional depth to the role. Number 8. The Groundhog was named Scooter. Although Groundhog Day centers around a holiday named after the famous forecasting rodent Punxsutawney Phil, the real animal used during filming had a very different name on set. He was affectionately and sometimes exasperatedly called Scooter by the production crew. Despite the cute nickname, Scooter quickly gained a reputation as one of the most difficult actors on set. To start with, Scooter wasn't a trained animal performer in the traditional sense. Groundhogs are wild animals, not domesticated pets, and they are certainly not accustomed to bright lights, cameras, and large crews. Interestingly, despite Scooter's unpredictable behavior, the crew gave him his nickname to distinguish him from the ceremonial Punxsutawney Phil, knowing that the real Phil wouldn't have been used for the shoot. In the end, Scooter delivered what the film needed reluctantly, and with a few bite marks to show for it. Number 7. The ice sculptures were real. One of the most endearing moments in Groundhog Day comes during Phil Connors' transformation from a cynical, self-centered weatherman into a kind and cultured man who wins the heart of Rita. Among the many skills he picks up during his time loop is ice sculpting. What most fans don't realize is that the ice sculptures shown in the film were 100% real. Although Murray himself didn't craft it, professional ice artists were brought in specifically for those scenes. These sculptures weren't just movie props, but legitimate works of art. Because the film was shot on location in Woodstock, Illinois, during winter, the cold temperatures helped preserve the sculptures during the filming schedule. To make the scenes believable, the production also paid close attention to how Murray handled the ice. In close-up shots where Phil is seen working on the ice, Murray handles real sculpting tools and chips away at actual blocks of ice. According to crew members, Murray took this part of his performance seriously, insisting that his gestures and tool handling appear as realistic as possible. Interestingly, the use of real ice instead of plastic props highlights the filmmaker's practical and grounded approach. Even though these frozen artworks were destined to melt away, like the endless days Phil relived, their presence helped create one of the film's most heartfelt and visually poetic sequences. Number 6. There was a musical adaptation. More than 2 decades after Groundhog Day became a beloved cinematic classic, its story was transformed into a musical performance. In 2016, Groundhog Day the musical made its debut, transforming the time loop tale into a dazzling, imaginative, and deeply emotional live performance. With songs by composer Tim Minchin and a script written by Danny Rubin, who was the original screenwriter of the film, the stage adaptation was both a tribute to and a reinvention of the original story. The musical premiered at London's Old Vic Theatre in the summer of 2016, where it was met with critical acclaim. Directed by Matthew Warchus, the musical brought both comic timing and emotional depth to the character of Phil Connors, made famous by Bill Murray. His iconic performance later won him the Olivier Award for Best Actor in a Musical. The success of this performance in London brought about the Broadway opening in April 2017. Despite critical praise, including 7 Tony Award nominations in 2017, the Broadway production had a relatively short run, closing in September of that year. Nevertheless, Groundhog Day. The musical lives on through cast recordings, fan appreciation, and the legacy of creatively adapting a beloved story. Number 5. One scene took 25 takes. In Groundhog Day, one of the recurring gags that perfectly illustrates Phil Connors' slow journey from self-centered jerk to empathetic human being is the moment when he gets slapped by Rita, played by Andie MacDowell. According to cast and crew interviews, the infamous slap scene was so important to get right that Andie MacDowell ended up slapping Bill Murray 25 times during filming. Since the film is centered around repetition, many scenes had to be shot multiple times with slight variations in tone and timing to reflect Phil's changing responses to his endless loop. The slap scene in particular needed to sell a crucial moment in Phil's journey. In that part of the movie, Phil is trying to win over Rita by memorizing her likes, dislikes, and values through endless repetition on the same day. However, instead of falling for his charm, Rita sees through Phil's manipulation. Her slaps are not only funny, they underscore a moral lesson that love can't be faked, and true connection requires honesty and vulnerability. Andie MacDowell, who played Rita, has recalled in interviews how exhausting it was to shoot that scene repeatedly. Despite the physical discomfort, both actors remained committed to the scene, understanding its significance to the narrative's rhythm and emotional truth. Bill Murray, known for his unpredictable on-set behavior, reportedly endured the ordeal with his usual mix of dry humor and stoicism. In the end, that relentless day of filming paid off. The slap scene remains one of the more iconic and perfectly timed physical comedy bits in the movie. Number 4. The alarm clock was designed to break. The image of the old-fashioned flip clock ticking from 5:59 to 6 a.m., with Sonny and Cher's "I Got You Babe" playing in the background, is forever linked to Phil Connors' nightmarish time loop. But behind the scenes, the production team treated that clock with the same level of attention and storytelling importance as they would a major character. It was so important that the prop department specifically designed a version of the clock to break on cue during one of the film's key frustration scenes. For the movie, the clock is more than a device to mark time. It is a symbol of Phil's torment. Each time he wakes up to the same morning, with the same music and the same dialogue from the radio hosts, the clock taunts him. And as Phil's desperation and hopelessness mount, it makes sense that he would eventually take out his anger on the only object that seems to have control over his fate. The filmmakers knew this moment had to hit hard, so the scene where Phil smashes the clock in frustration was carefully planned. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, the prop department constructed multiple versions of the alarm clock, including the one that was engineered to shatter convincingly when hurled across the room, or pounded with a fist. The dramatic smashing of the clock visually punctuated his psychological breakdown and signaled a turning point in the narrative. Number 3. The snowball fight was real. Among the many memorable sequences in Groundhog Day, one scene that always stands out for its lightheartedness is the snowball fight between Phil Connors and a group of kids. The snowball fight was spontaneous, and much of it was Bill Murray just being Bill Murray, hurling real snowballs and genuinely playing around on set. According to director Harold Ramis and other crew members, the snowball scene wasn't originally in the shooting script in the way it ended up on screen. During a break in production, Murray spotted some kids nearby and began tossing snowballs at them for fun. Ramis, seeing an opportunity to capture something authentic and joyful, had the cameras roll, and a cinematic magic unfolded. What makes the scene so effective is its contrast to earlier moments in the film. Phil Connors begins the story as a cynical, selfish man, but by the time of the snowball fight, he has begun to embrace the small joys of life in Punxsutawney. That emotional honesty was only heightened by the real reactions of the children involved. Number 2. The final kiss was filmed in one take. After a story filled with countless days and do-overs, Groundhog Day ends on a note of genuine transformation. According to director Harold Ramis and actress Andie MacDowell, the romantic resolution required no second chances. This kiss isn't just a romantic payoff, it symbolizes the completion of Phil's journey and the breaking of the time loop. Getting the tone just right was crucial. The one-take execution was so impressive because the entire film had demanded a meticulous balance of comedy, emotion, and philosophy. Scenes were often repeated from different emotional perspectives to reflect Phil's growth through each loop. However, this final scene reveals that the loop is finally broken and time moves forward. That is why it was essential to capture an organic, unstaged emotional moment. And somehow, the cast and crew did it in one go. Interviews have revealed that Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell had grown increasingly in sync during the production. The mutual affection and relief felt at the end of the story came so authentically that Harold Ramis decided they didn't need a second take. Ramis later described the take as magical. The production of Groundhog Day had been notoriously difficult, marked by tensions between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, as well as Murray's struggles off-camera. Wrapping up the film with such a sincere and graceful moment provided emotional closure for everyone involved. Number 1. The film helped define Groundhog Day syndrome. Groundhog Day is widely recognized as a classic romantic comedy and philosophical fable, but its cultural impact extends far beyond Hollywood. The movie's central concept, which was reliving the same day over and over, has inspired the coined real-world psychological term, which is Groundhog Day syndrome. The term is frequently used by psychologists, writers, and social commentators to describe the experience of monotony, emotional stagnation, or the perception of time looping endlessly. It's often applied to people struggling with depression, burnout, PTSD, or those trapped in unchanging routines. In essence, Groundhog Day syndrome captures the psychological toll of experiencing repetitive existential patterns. The phrase began to enter popular usage not long after the film's release in 1993. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, the term Groundhog Day syndrome spiked in use globally. Lockdowns and a sense of helplessness over changing circumstances led many to describe their days as feeling eerily like the film where time stood still and nothing seemed to change. What began as a high-concept comedy has thus evolved into a psychological reference point. Its resonance with the human experience, feeling stuck, searching for purpose, and striving for transformation, has elevated it into more than just entertainment. It has become a modern fable for emotional and mental growth and renewal. And what have you learned from these weird facts about Groundhog Day? Share with us in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Before you go, click on the video displayed on your screen.